What's ahead for Zambia after the death of Michael Sata? We'll take a closer look. Ebola and the U.S. midterm elections. Yes, Americans can play politics with a deadly disease. And a new vaccine against malaria may be only months away. Africa 54 starts right now.
Hello, I'm Lenore Moudou. Vincent Makere is on assignment. This is Africa 54. The African Union has given Burkina Faso's military a 2-week deadline to return power to a civilian transitional government. The AU Peace and Security Council says the army acted unconstitutionally when it took over after President Blaise Compaoré was forced to resign. Interim leader Colonel Isaac Zida says the military has no desire to usurp power. He says a civilian-led transitional government will be established as quickly as possible. Still, the AU wants action sooner than later.
Es en este sentido que el Consejo de Paz y Seguridad de la Unión Africana,
Africa Union Peace and Security Council has taken the note of origin of the popular revolt, determining the period of 2 weeks for the transfer of power to civilian administration. And if they don't comply, the AU will take measures according to AU's rule.
And among the possible sanctions, the AU could suspend Burkina Faso's membership in the organization and impose a travel ban on military officials. Now, Zambia's acting president, Guy Scott, is in political hot water after sacking the country's defense minister from a key ruling party position. But many Zambians are expressing support for Scott as the country prepares to bury President Michael Sata and hold new elections within 90 days. We get more from VOA's Mariama Diallo.
Thousands of Zambians formed lines to pay tribute and mourn the death of their 5th president, Michael Sata, who will be buried on November 11th. Mr. Sata's work and passion for the country was demonstrated while he was in office, says Palan Mulonda, Zambia's ambassador to the United States.
In the last 3 years, Zambia has seen unprecedented development. And what is interesting is that President Sata was a leader who associated himself with the underprivileged.
This is not the first time that Zambia has lost a sitting president. In 2008, President Levi Mwanawasa died in office at the age of 59. What's new is that the late president's interim successor is a white Zambian. Former Vice President Guy Scott is the son of Scottish parents who immigrated to Zambia. In a public address, Scott hasn't brought attention to his skin color.
As acting president for 90 days, or less, hopefully, if we can move ahead with the elections, my legacy will be a peaceful and fair election and a smooth transition.
Zambians seem to have mixed opinions about having Africa's first white head of state in 20 years.
Mr. Guy Scott is qualified to do the job, because they wouldn't have chosen him to be vice president if he was not qualified to do that.
It's not right. You know, 50 years after independence, I think we're supposed to have our own indigenous person acting in that position.
Kenneth Mwanda, a professor of law at American University and a Zambian native, thinks Mr. Scott's position is appropriate.
Guy Scott is a great guy to start with. He was born in Zambia, in Livingstone, the city where I was born. Believe me, Guy Scott has been in Zambia more than I have been in Zambia. Although my parents are indigenous Zambians, but I cannot claim legitimacy to being more Zambian than Guy Scott.
Plus, Mwanda says Mr. Scott is a key person in Michael Sata's political party.
They built the Patriotic Front from the scratch with Michael Sata. So this is somebody who's been there on the ground. So there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever regarding his loyalty to the country. He's a Zambian 100%.
According to the provisions of the Republican Constitution,
the 70-year-old Scott, a Cambridge-educated economist, is not eligible to run for president in the upcoming elections because his parents were not born in Zambia. Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
U.S. voters are going to the polls Tuesday to elect senators, congressmen, and regional leaders. The results will determine the balance of power in Washington and set the tone for President Obama's final 2 years in office. Joining us from our position overlooking the U.S. Capitol is Jim Malone, VOA's national correspondent. Welcome, Jim, to Africa 54.
Thank you very much.
So, according to projections, the Republicans are supposed to be winning this election. Can you explain how this election could change the current balance of power in America?
Sure. You can probably see behind me that the Capitol dome of the Capitol building is undergoing a bit of a facelift. Well, think of it in these terms. What's going on today as Americans vote is a bit of a congressional facelift. Republicans do stand to do well. They're probably going to increase their majority in the House of Representatives. The big question is, can they defeat enough Democrats to take a majority in the U.S. Senate? If they were to control both bodies, the Senate and the House, for the last 2 years of Barack Obama's presidency, that would shift the balance of power. It would limit the president's agenda. It might force both sides to try to do compromise. But it would also give Republicans perhaps a sort of leg up as they look to the 2016 presidential elections just 2 years away.
So exactly, speaking of the 2016 election, is this election then going to give us any hints to what to expect in 2016?
A little bit. For example, during the campaign that's just ended today, you didn't see much of President Obama campaigning for Democrats. Many of them wanted to keep a bit of distance because his low approval ratings are basically a drag on Democratic candidates. Guess who you did see out there? You saw Bill Clinton and you saw Hillary Clinton. And, of course, all Democrats are pointing to 2016 when they hope, some expect Hillary Clinton to run for president. We won't know until early next year whether that will be the case. But a number of prominent Republicans were also out there campaigning for their side. Jeb Bush, the former Florida governor, and New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. So a lot of what's gone on is sort of a precursor to the 2016 race.
So you talk about Governor Bush and Chris Christie. What are some of the key races to watch?
Well, a couple of things here. You really want to watch Democratic seats, especially those in Republican states. Many of those will probably go Republican tonight. Keep an eye out in the early returns for the Senate races in New Hampshire and in North Carolina. Both are held by Democrats. If one or both of those go to Republicans early in the evening, you're going to know it's going to be a very big night for Republicans, and we could know by Wednesday morning whether or not Republicans have a majority in the Senate. If not, it actually could be a few months before we know, because some states have what we call runoff elections, and the decision could be delayed.
So in a general sense, what will President Obama gain or lose when the results are added up?
Well, Republicans have succeeded in making this race about President Obama. That doesn't look like it's good news for the Democrats. The president has a decision to make. Does he try to cooperate with Republicans or simply try to play defense? Think of it as a football match. Republicans will be a lot more on offense over the next 2 years, especially if they gain a majority in the Senate.
I know a lot of people look to the United States during elections, during the presidential elections, but why are these midterms elections so important?
Well, because it does affect the balance of power. It is an expression of American democracy every 2 years. This is something the world should understand, that this is the way it was set up for us, and Americans are going to vote today. They don't vote in as big a numbers as they would during presidential years, and that's a factor that actually helps the Republican Party. Democrats have more of a challenge today in getting out their core supporters.
I will be on the lookout. Jim Malone, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was Jim Malone. He will be back with us on Wednesday to discuss the results and what they mean for President Obama and the 2016 U.S. presidential race. As reported, the Ebola outbreak has emerged as an issue in the U.S. elections. In recent days, President Obama has been front and center on the Ebola response after polls showed many Americans disapproved of his handling of the situation. VOA's Aru Pandey reports from the White House.
From giving a big hug to newly recovered nurse Nina Pham to thanking U.S. healthcare workers on the front lines of the Ebola fight.
So we need to call them what they are, which is American heroes. They deserve our gratitude.
President Obama has spent a good part of the past 2 weeks reassuring the American public on Ebola, even taking a few minutes before embarking on a campaign trip last week to speak to reporters at the White House.
America, in the end, is not defined by fear. That's not who we are. America is defined by possibility, and when we see a problem and we see a challenge, then we fix it.
The stepped-up media effort seems to be working, with a recent poll showing about 49% of those surveyed approve of President Obama's handling of the Ebola issue, up 8% from 2 weeks ago. George Washington University professor Matt Dallek.
All these aggressive ways in which the White House has been trying to kind of push back on the story, demonstrate that it's in charge and that it is effective, have been helpful politically.
But it's not just President Obama who's made Ebola a central issue in recent days. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, seen here campaigning for Republican candidates, made headlines after he ordered the quarantine of an American nurse who had returned from treating Ebola patients in West Africa.
We're not going to take any risks with the public health in New Jersey.
Political management professor Matt Dallek says crises like Ebola and the Islamic State militant groups gaining ground in Iraq have created an opening for Republicans during the midterm election campaign.
At least historically, in the last 30, 40 years, Republicans have often been seen as being stronger than Democrats, tough on national security, tough on law and order, being willing to take the extra step to protect you.
While global crises have influenced U.S. midterm campaigns, the impact of Americans' fear of Ebola will likely be made clear on Tuesday when voters decide who should represent them in Congress. Aru Pandey, VOA News, the White House.
In South Africa, state prosecutors have appealed the conviction and sentence given to track star Oscar Pistorius. Pistorius was found guilty of culpable homicide for shooting dead his girlfriend Riva Steenkamp last year, and last month began serving a 5-year prison sentence. But South Africa's National Prosecuting Authority had said it was disappointed with both decisions. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, eliminating malaria. Are we getting closer? The latest coming up right after the break.
Wherever you are, Voice of America is on air, reaching more than 130 million weekly, worldwide, in more than 40 languages. Online, social media, and breaking news from around the world. On the go, dozens of new features on popular platforms with new apps and trending topics. Voice of America, on air, online, on the go.
I am Shaka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
Welcome back to Africa 54. On today's health, 2 steps forward in the fight against malaria. American billionaire Bill Gates says his foundation put another $115 million into PATH malaria vaccine initiative, and scientists in Kenya say a new malaria vaccine will be available as early as next year. Mohammed Yusuf reports from Nairobi.
Malaria kills more than 500,000 people a year worldwide and causes illness in millions more, most of them children living in sub-Saharan Africa. A third of all patients in Kenya's third largest city, Kisumu, and its environs suffer from malaria. Although existing interventions have helped to reduce the disease over the past decade, scientists in this lab in Western Kenya are working on a vaccine with the help of Britain's GlaxoSmithKline and other partners that could add an important component to malaria control. Scientists say vaccinating people, especially young children, is a key to eradicating the disease. Dr. Martina Oneko helped to carry out the vaccination process in rural Western Kenya.
We saw a very good very good success of the vaccine, resulting in health improvements in these children. They were just not as sick as their counterparts in the community who were not vaccinated. The overall vaccine efficacy in the older age group for all the sites was 47%, and in the younger age group it was 27%.
The RTS vaccine prevents the malaria parasite from infecting, maturing and multiplying in the liver, from which it normally re-enters the blood and infects red blood cells, leading to the disease. Some residents have welcomed the initiative.
Pregnant mothers and even children, unborn babies, they've been dying because of malaria. So I think with the introduction of that vaccine, we will save many young lives.
Even me, I will use it. Even my family as well will use it. We accept it.
According to malaria researchers, the vaccine might not be the final answer to malaria, but along with other measures like mosquito nets, spraying drainage systems and clearing bushes, it may make a big difference to millions of people in sub-Saharan Africa. Mohammed Yusuf for VOA News, Kisumu, Western Kenya.
Refugee groups say thousands of African lives are at risk now that Italy has ended its migrant search and rescue mission in the Mediterranean. The European Union has taken over the operation, but critics say it is much smaller in scale and poorly funded. Henry Ridgewell reports from London.
Italy launched its Mare Nostrum operation a year ago after 500 migrants died off the island of Lampedusa in October 2013, forcing the government into action. Italian Coast Guard and Navy vessels backed by aircraft rescued an estimated 150,000 people in 1 year alone. It cost $11.9 million a month. The operation ended November 1st. Italian Interior Minister Angelino Alfano said Rome could no longer foot the bill.
Il numero dei morti non è proporzionale agli euro spesi.
The death toll is not proportional to the amount of euros spent. We have carried out a mission of which we are proud, and which began as a time-limited mission. The area covered by this mission almost reached the North African coast.
Italy has long complained that its European partners have offered far too little help in dealing with the influx. More than 2,500 migrants are known to have died in the past 12 months attempting to cross the Mediterranean. The European Union's border agency, Frontex, is taking over the rescue mission under the codename Triton, but it has a third of the resources and only covers up to 50 kilometres from Europe's shores. Refugee and migrant support groups have strongly criticised the decision to end the rescue mission across the Mediterranean. Günter Burkhardt is from the group Pro-Asyl in Germany.
Ganz kleines Gebiet. Es wird noch mehr Tote auf dem Meer geben.
There will be more dead at sea. Foreign ministers see the necessity to provide more aid, but the interior ministers of Europe do everything to seal off the borders for refugees, especially those from Syria.
EU officials say member states have been slow in offering funding, personnel and equipment.
Member states alone, they cannot do it. Frontex alone, they cannot do it. So we need to cooperate, all of us together, to try and put a stop to this terrible drama.
Britain supported the end of Italy's rescue mission, saying it encouraged more migrants to attempt the dangerous sea crossing. Britain has offered just a single immigration officer for the new EU mission. Europe says more must be done to tackle the traffickers who organise the treacherous crossings, charging between $1,500 and $3,500 for each migrant. Among those attempting to cross are tens of thousands of Syrians fleeing the civil war, alongside Iraqis, Afghans, Eritreans and economic migrants from across Africa. Pope Francis, at a ceremony to celebrate All Saints' Day in Rome Saturday, criticised the global response to those fleeing war and hunger.
Questa gente, questi bambini affamati.
It seems that these people, these hungry children, these sick children, they do not count. It seems that they belong to another species. It seems they are not human.
Refugee support groups say migrants fleeing war and poverty will not be put off by the decision to end Operation Mare Nostrum. and the boats will keep coming. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Still to come on Africa 54, a catwalk-eye view of Fashion Week in Johannesburg. But first, a recap of Tuesday's headlines.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Burkina Faso, ex-Prime Minister of Togo, Edem Kodjo, is appointed by the African Union to help aid a 2-week peaceful transfer of power. In Zambia, interim President Guy Scott fires Defense Minister Edgar Lungu, sparking a political row and protests. In Nigeria, gunmen use explosives, kill 1 and free 144 inmates from Lokoja prison. Finally, in Nigeria, residents flee from Boko Haram militants who have seized the city of Mubi, killing dozens. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Today's youth are not just the next generation of African leaders, they are today's leaders. And this is the time to invest in them, today, not tomorrow. So let's connect, let's engage with each other on issues that will transform our societies. Innovation, leadership, entrepreneurship, things that you're doing to move the continent forward, to make you the greatest generation that Africa has known. It's Upfront every Wednesday, 17:30 UTC, right here on The Voice of America.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here is what's trending. What's in a kiss? Well, in India, a kiss can be a political statement. A group of protesters in the southern state of Kerala observed a kiss day to protest moral policing. The event follows last week's attack on a coffee shop by youth-wing activists of India's ruling BJP who were alleging immoral activities. Kiss Day organizers spread the word on a Facebook page called Kiss of Love. Counter-protesters say public displays of affection are against Indian culture and tradition. Next up, a big moment for Conchita.
Out of the ashes seeking rather than vengeance, retribution.
That's Eurovision Song Contest winner and bearded cross-dressing diva Conchita Wurst performing at a United Nations conference. She then teamed up with UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to call for an end to bias based on a person's sexual orientation. And of course, she sung Rise Like a Phoenix, the song that won her the top Eurovision prize. And finally, how can you make a facial even more luxurious? Just add diamonds. Clients at the Palm Resort in Dubai can now get facials with a beauty cream containing quartz diamonds. The diamonds are ground up and mixed with other ingredients to produce a line of beauty products. Manufacturers say the quartz diamonds boost collagen and so help to plump out the skin, making it more luminous. The natural-based diamond facial comes at a sparkling price of $325. And that's what's trending today. When it comes to fashion, Africans are among the trendsetters. And this year's Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week was no different. Models rocked the runway in a riot of colors, shapes, and patterns. Here's VOA's Anita Powell in Johannesburg.
Fashion Week is the opportunity for designers, both established and new, to present their vision in major capitals. It's also the marketing event in what has become a multi-billion-dollar global industry. This is Johannesburg, Africa's gritty economic hub, and, some hope, a new fashion destination. Aspiring designer and stylist Napo Kalebe was one of many fashion fiends who ventured from afar, in his case from the neighboring country of Lesotho.
Oh, I'm wearing myself actually.
To see this year's spectacle.
So I think it's really intriguing. I love the event. It's very big and it's very, very, very fashion forward.
Longtime designer Marianne Fassler says she pulls heavily from traditional African style for her eponymous label.
I reflect a tradition of print. I reflect definitely the colors and the shapes, and very often the beading, and much more literal Africa throughout my career. But what makes it contemporary is the way I interpret them.
Others, like up-and-coming designer Rich Manisi, say they're looking toward the future and trying to merge African ideas with cutting-edge design. Manisi, who designs for his own line, called Oath, works out of a studio in his garage in Johannesburg.
I think it's evolved, and we're showing like a different take on, or like those stereotypes of like print on print and geometrics and stuff like that. Because a lot of the young designers I've seen right now are still they keep it very African, but bring in like a Western feel to it so that it's more contemporary.
Both designers agree that African fashion has distinct qualities that make it stand out from the rest of the pack.
We also have a very ethical approach to our art or our craft. We upcycle. A lot of our clothes are the shapes and the textures are created by scraps. We create really beautifully crafted, upcycled pieces.
More than 30 designers presented their collections at this year's Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week Africa. And the appetite for African fashion is growing. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 300 and 600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and good night from Washington.
Welcome to the Voice of America's News Words, where we teach you about words in the news.
Today's word has to do with criminal charges and the courts.
The indictment that the grand jury returned today charges the defendant with numerous counts, among them conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction resulting in death and using a weapon of mass destruction resulting in death.
An indictment is a list of charges against someone after he or she has been arrested for a crime.
It details what the person will stand trial for in a U.S. court of law. Now, when you hear the word indictment,
your English will be good enough to know what this news word means.